Alright, so today we'll be looking at a little bit of a different vehicle, the 2S1 Gvozdika. The 2S1 Gvozdika is a Soviet 122mm self-propelled artillery system designed for regimental use. It is the world's first mass-produced amphibious tracked self-propelled artillery system. Amongst other needs, it was designed to destroy enemy personnel, artillery batteries, and fortifications, as well as to clear passages through minefields and obstacles. This video here will be about a few problems the Gvozdika had during its development. So hello and welcome and enjoy this video. Unlike the Americans, who had used mobile indirect fire artillery early on, the Soviets had focused on direct fire support for their infantry since World War II. This meant they used weapons which aimed straight at their targets, like tanks or assault guns, instead of firing over obstacles from hidden positions. It took almost 20 years for the Soviets to shift away from this strategy. During and after World War II, Soviet assault guns like the ISU-152 for example, were usually heavily armored, had powerful guns and could even fire indirectly, but they weren't very mobile, which made them less effective in fast-moving battles where flexibility and quick repositioning were important. Mobility was very important because even though the Soviet army's offensive strategy still relied heavily on large-scale attacks with shock units supported by massive artillery fire, small unit leaders were also trained to be ready for meeting unexpected engagements where two forces just run into each other without much time to prepare. Also, in the late 1960s, the Soviet army began introducing the T-64, which was a groundbreaking tank that is now seen as the first true main battle tank. It had a very good power-to-weight ratio, high top speed, long driving range, strong armor, and a powerful gun. Around the same time, the tracked BMP, which was considered the first true infantry fighting vehicle, was also being deployed. The BMP was designed to match the mobility of main battle tanks, which allowed the infantry to move quickly alongside them. However, there was a problem. If the Soviet army continued relying on towed howitzers for artillery support, this new mobility advantage would be wasted. Towed artillery was slower and harder to move, which meant it couldn't keep up with the T-64s and BMPs during fast-paced advances. Without replacing towed howitzers with self-propelled artillery, the faster combat units risked outrunning their artillery support, which would leave them without artillery. Because of this, from 1947 to 1953, the Soviets started researching something new, self-propelled howitzers. But in 1955, the leader of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev, decided to stop most of the work on self-propelled artillery. And not just self-propelled artillery, but really he stopped development on all kinds of conventional military hardware in favor of nuclear missile technology. Before World War II, the Soviet Union was already working on lightly armored self-propelled guns. However, the war itself, combined with the rather traditional thinking of Soviet officers and the lower cost of towed artillery, slowed down the development of SPGs. Things changed with the beginning of the atomic age. Quite early on, the Soviet Ministry of Defense realized that a full-scale nuclear war wasn't likely because it would eradicate both sides of the war completely. Who would have thought? On the other hand, the use of small tactical nuclear weapons, like the ones we use in War Thunder, became a real possibility on the battlefield. In these kinds of battles, self-propelled artillery had clear advantages over towed artillery. It's probably obvious to you, but I'm still gonna say it. The big advantage of self-propelled guns was their ability to protect their crews from nuclear, biological, and chemical threats. This was done by pressurizing the vehicle's hull, which kept harmful substances out. In contrast, towed artillery crews were highly exposed and vulnerable to nuclear weapons. This made self-propelled guns much more appealing for modern warfare. After Khrushchev was, thank God, removed from power, the Soviet Union restarted its work on SPGs. In 1965, the Soviet military carried out large-scale exercises at the Lviv training ground, in which they used artillery units, which had been around since World War II, to test their combat value and see if they could still be used in modern warfare. Very surprisingly, These trials showed the inferiority of Soviet self-propelled guns to those used by NATO. That was basically when they realized they needed something new, so therefore, to catch up with NATO's more advanced self-propelled artillery, the Soviet government took action. On July 4, 1967, the Central Committee of the Communist Party and the Council of Ministers of the USSR issued a resolution. This officially launched the development of a new 122mm self-propelled howitzer designed specifically for the Soviet Army's ground forces. During the initial research for the new SPG, they came up with the design and key features of the vehicle. They looked at three possible base chassis options for the SPG. The first option was the Object 124 chassis, which came from the Su-100P. Even though it weighed 22.2 tons, this vehicle was surprisingly fast with a top speed of 70 km an hour thanks to its powerful 520 horsepower engine. It had a large ammo capacity of 100 rounds, however, it couldn't float or cross waters like amphibious vehicles. For a 122mm howitzer system, its weight and power were considered too much. It was capable of handling much larger workloads than what was actually needed for this type of weapon, which made it somewhat overbuilt for the job. The second option was the MTLB chassis, which was a multi-purpose transporter, basically the workhorse of the Soviet Army, which was used in every possible way. This version could carry fewer ammunition rounds, only 60 compared to the other options, but it was lighter, weighing almost 16 tons. However, it still used the same 240 horsepower diesel engine as the basic MTLB, which meant it wasn't as fast as the other designs. Its top speed was limited to 60 km per hour, which made it slower overall. The third option was the BMP-1 chassis. This version could carry 60 rounds of ammunition and was a bit lighter than the prototype based on the extended MTLB chassis. It was amphibious, meaning it could cross water at about 4.5 km per hour, and it provided a stable platform for firing. It was also fast and could be easily transported. However, it weighed 15.1 tons, which made it heavier than the original BMP-1 on which it was based. Despite this extra weight, it didn't get a more powerful engine. While its top speed was officially the same as the BMP-1 at 65 km per hour, the added weight likely affected its acceleration and handling and made it less agile in practice. All three variants were armed with a 122mm D30 gun. From the beginning, the 122mm D30 howitzer was selected as the main weapon for the new self-propelled howitzer. The idea was to use the same ammunition as the older D30 towed howitzers. This way, when artillery units upgraded to the new system, they wouldn't have to deal with different types of ammo, which would make the transition more efficient. Even though the D30 had already been in service for a while, it was still a highly effective weapon. The Soviet Army's artillery branch was satisfied with its performance and didn't feel the need to redesign or improve it further. The concept for the new self-propelled howitzer was straightforward. Take the D30 and mount it on a tracked vehicle. To add some protection, the vehicle would have light armor. This armor was designed to protect against counter-battery fire during indirect fire missions and small arms fire during direct combat. Essentially, it was about making the reliable D30 more mobile and better suited for modern warfare. So they slapped this gun on the different chassis and started testing around. Taking into account all the pros and cons I mentioned before, the BMP-1 chassis was considered the best option overall. However, a guy named P.P. Isakov, who coincidentally was the designer of the BMP-1 and the hero of socialist labor, as well as the USSR State Prize Laureate, successfully used his influence to forbid the SPG designers from using the BMP-1 chassis as the basis of the vehicle. Isakov, for God knows what reasons, applied the same ban to other derived vehicles which were proposed on the BMP-1 chassis due to production streamlining efforts. As a result, it was decided to use an extended and modified version of the MTLB chassis as the base. These studies formed the foundation for the Gvozdika development project with the Grau index 2S1. Gvozdika means carnation because for some reason the Soviets named all of their self-propelled guns after flowers. The Gvozdika was intended to be deployed in the artillery divisions of motorized rifle regiments as well as in tank units, including the single tank regiment of motorized rifle divisions and tank regiments organized under tank divisions, replacing the 122mm and 30 and D30 howitzers. The first units to get the new 2S1 self-propelled howitzer were tank regiments. After that were infantry regiments using BMPs. However, infantry regiments equipped with BTRs continued to rely on the older D30 towed howitzers until the Cold War ended. In practice, this meant that most of the 2S1s went to tank divisions, as these divisions typically had 3 tank regiments and 1 infantry regiment, all using BMPs. The 2S1 was also used in artillery divisions, but the number of 2S1s varied depending on the division. Most Soviet artillery divisions had a mix of 2S1s and 2S3 howitzers. Typically, there were 2 heavy regiments equipped with the 2S3 and 1 light regiment equipped with the 2S1. However, some artillery divisions were entirely outfitted with 2S3 howitzers. The widespread use of the Gvozdika at the regimental level was a big step towards implementing the mobility factor of the 2S1. It gave smaller mobile units a lot of independence on the battlefield. These units could count on quick and reliable artillery support during fast-moving combat, which was something that wouldn't have been possible if artillery was only available at a higher organizational level. Also, Soviet regiments were smaller than US Army brigades but played a similar role. This smaller size meant that there were very high concentration of artillery within each regiment, which made the support more readily available. Whether it was indirect fire or direct fire, the Gvozdika ensured that the right kind of support could be provided depending on the situation. Now you probably noticed that the Gvozdika entered the Soviet army very late. Reason for that was partly because of the global focus on missile technology in the late 1950s and early 1960s. This priority was pushed even more by Soviet PM Nikita Khrushchev in 1955, who personally stepped in to restrict the development of all types of towed artillery. As a result, most work on self-propelled artillery was stopped. However, on October 14, 1964, Khrushchev was removed from his position as chairman of the Council of Ministers of the USSR. After his removal, many of his military policies were reversed, including the ban on developing self-propelled tube artillery. This change allowed the Soviet military to restart its work on these weapons. The main developer of the 2S1 Gvozdika self-propelled howitzer was the Kharkiv tractor plant. In August 1969, they built 4 experimental 2S1 units and put them through field tests. During testing, a major problem showed up. The crew compartment was filling with too much gas after firing, which made it unsafe and uncomfortable for the crew inside. At the same time, a similar situation arose with the 152mm self-propelled howitzer 2S3. As you could imagine, it's not that cool to inhale toxic gases. I mean, those times were over by then. To fix the problem, engineers tried to figure out how to redesign the 2S1 and 2S3 to use bag-loaded flexible bags instead of rigid cartridges, which can reduce the amount of leftover gas inside the vehicle. This idea was brought to life by a 122mm howitzer called D16, which was developed based on the 2A31 design, but it used bag loading instead of the older system. The D16 replaced the wedge breech lock, chain rammer, and shell casings with a screw breech, a pneumatic rammer, and bag charges where the explosive material is packed in bags instead of rigid cases. However, tests showed that the D16 had similar problems as the older design. The muzzle flash was just as intense, the accuracy wasn't improved, and the firing range stayed the same. Handling the bagged charges was also somehow described as awkward, and the pneumatic rammer had design flaws which made the firing speed no better than the original howitzer. After several improvements, the D16 was upgraded to the D16M model. This version could fire high explosive fragmentation shells up to 18 km far thanks to a larger chamber and more powerful bagged charges. In 1971, the Third Central Scientific Research Institute reviewed the research on backloading designs for 122mm and 152mm howitzers under the development program. Although there were some performance improvements, the Institute decided that it wasn't practical to keep working on backloading systems for the 2A31 howitzer. The main problem was that at the time, there weren't reliable or safe ways to create charges in rigid bags or combustible cases. Instead of continuing with backloading systems, the research was used to help design new 122mm high explosive fragmentation shells with better aerodynamic shapes to improve their performance. As for the gas contamination issue in the 2S1 crew compartment, it was solved differently. Engineers added a stronger ejector and improved the sealing of the shell casings to keep the compartment safe and clean. The results were satisfactory. Therefore, on September 14, 1970, the CPSU Central Committee and the Council of Ministers of the USSR officially approved the 2S1 Gvozdika self-propelled howitzer for use in the Soviet Army. In 1972, testing was completed on the 2P134 parachute platform, which was designed to airdrop the 2S1. This platform could carry up to 20.5 tons, therefore also the howitzer, and used a 5-canopy parachute system called the PS940463R. The idea was to make it possible to drop the 2S1 from planes into battle zones. The platform, parachute system, and the 2S1 itself successfully passed all the required tests. However, the airborne forces decided not to adopt this system because they were already working on a different self-propelled howitzer, the 122mm 2S2 Fialka. The Soviet Union started mass-producing the 2S1 Gvozdika in 1971, and production continued until the end of 1991. Poland also began making the 2S1 under license in 1971, followed by Bulgaria in 1979. With over 10,000 units produced, the Gvozdika has been used in many major conflicts, including the Afghanistan War, the Iran-Iraq War, the Syrian Civil War, and the Yugoslav Civil War. Today, it is still in use in Ukraine. The 2S1 saw its first combat action during the war in Afghanistan. It was used in a tactical role where batteries of 2S1s followed assault groups using direct fire to destroy enemy positions as soon as they were discovered. This approach helped reduce Soviet trooper losses significantly. When operating in tough terrain, special reserve batteries of 2S1s provided fire support to ensure the safety of the advancing units. Commanders and artillery platoons coordinated these batteries, reinforcing motorized rifle battalions and companies. One notable moment in the 2S1's use was the operation to capture the Shingar and Hakhisovet regions. In 1968, the 2S1 played a key role during an offensive in Kandahar, where its platoons provided crucial fire support to battalions. The 2S1's performance in Afghanistan was overall considered positive. Anyways, that was all I had to say for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you think I said anything that is not right, or you think I should have added any additional information to this video, please let me know in the comments and share your knowledge. Besides that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.